thank you so much for coming and sharing the opening of our new Centre for Philosophy of History. I'm not going to say very much at all, just a couple of points. Firstly, just to talk a little bit about the aims of the centre. Mark and I established the centre with the hope that it would help facilitate and promote both research into and the teaching of the philosophy of history. And as such, we envisage that the centre will encompass all sorts of topics and issues and questions that you can put under the rubric of the philosophy of history. But particularly, we see it as being orientated towards exploring, thinking about historical practices which are concerned with ethical issues, social solidarity and political activism. Enough really about the centre. Well, a few more things, I think. A few of the activities that we're going to be engaged in. Firstly, we see it as a place to help organise a series of seminars, as well as conferences and workshops. And indeed, we've already started the seminar series here. A few weeks ago, we were lucky enough to have Marnie Hughes-Warrington come and give a paper on history as wonder, which was extremely interesting and very well attended. And we have some more seminars planned for semester 2 and for future years. Mark and I are also in the process of planning a series of workshops exploring more closely issues of ethics and political activism surrounding history, production and consumption. And you can find out more about the seminars and workshops on our new website and also on our blog, so do please check that out. But most importantly, I think we both agree, we also see the centre as a means of integrating our teaching with our research. And we're really pleased that today, so many of our level 2 students, because we teach a core module on the philosophy of history, can actually be here and can meet in person and can hear the ideas of some of the key thinkers in this field. And that to us is really what the centre's about, this meeting of people doing research and writing about it, and also our students who are reading and learning and exploring on the subject. Okay, so it leaves me really just to thank all the people who have helped make not just today and the opening happen, but the centre happen as well. And we've had so much support and advice and help from people, both from our own institution and from other institutions. In particular, I'd like to thank Lance, our head of school, for all his help and his encouragement in this project. I'd like to thank Leslie and Claire, as well as all of the senior management team. I'd also like to thank both our internal and external affiliates for the support they've given and for agreeing to help us with this project, and we look forward to working more closely with you over the coming months and years. In terms of today, I'd like to thank everybody in Reaper Graphics and Catering and Conferencing for coming along and making this day very special for us. Lastly, I'd like to thank the speakers. We're so pleased and honoured that you could be here and share your research and your thoughts on this subject with all of us today. So,
Alun Munslow is a Professorial Research Fellow at St Mary's. He's the UK editor of Rethinking History, the Journal of Theory and Practice, which he helped to set up back in 1997. His research interests centre on the understanding of history as a fictively construed, literary and experimental critique. In terms of his writing, I think really beginning with Deconstructing History in 1997 and another, around about 10 authored or edited works, Alun has carefully dismantled the idea that history is a representation of the real past. He's a skilled theorist of historical narrativization. In various glossaries and handbooks, he's helped to clarify difficult technical and philosophical terms for readers and students. I think he's probably best known to successive cohorts of St Mary's history students for his typology of Reconstructionist, Constructionist and Deconstructionist histories. If you'd known the trouble that he caused, you might have. His most recent books are The Future of History and a collection of edited essays by leading historians called Authoring the Past, Writing and Rethinking History. And Alun is currently working on a book on the aesthetic process of history. Can I introduce Professor Keith Jenkins, who has now retired, retired in 2008, and doesn't write anymore. That's probably the main reason we didn't ask him to actually provide a paper today. We just asked him to come and make himself available to answer questions. Although he no longer writes, he is still a regular attender of various research seminars and conferences. Keith is on the editorial board of the journal that Alan was talking about earlier, Rethinking History. I don't want to embarrass Keith, but I do think that more than any other individual, Keith has challenged and changed the way that historians, certainly in the UK, have conceptualised, discussed what they did and their idea of who they should actually read. From the very widely read and translated book Rethinking History, which a lot of people in the room have had a look at, came out in 1991. From that book onwards, Keith has argued that any meanings that the past has come from outside, put there by us, discursively working within the rules of a language game, which would mean that there were as many meanings of the past as we could imagine for ourselves. Some historians have found Keith's writing quite confrontational and upsetting. He's always acknowledged his intellectual debt to writers like Hayden White, Jack Derrida, the early Frank Anker Smith, and others. But I think he also found his own way of applying the ideas of these writers, first of all, initially in support of the writing of what we could broadly call postmodern histories. And then from 1999 onwards, from his book Why History, Ethics and Postmodernity, to the argument that we can debate history, we just don't need histories anymore, certainly not for our various political projects. Keith's last book, which is called At the Limits of History, Essays on Theory and Practice, I think summarises very well his thinking on history as a set of discursive and social practices.
I'm not a resurrectionist, but I am, for better or worse, a scientist, and I just wanted to probe you about whether, because I've never heard anything like what you shared before and found it fascinating, but can we, post-Einstein, categorically say that there will never be a connection between the present and the past if time travel does become a reality? Would that pose a problem to your idea?
No, it wouldn't, because when the time traveller returned, they still have to create a narrative about what they've seen and experienced.
Yeah. When we were reading the chapter from your book in our seminar last week, we kind of came up with the question that if our historical knowledge and the language used is so unstable, how and why would you suggest that we study history if the language that we're always using and the knowledge itself is quite unstable? How would you suggest we kind of go about studying history?
Well, I suppose that if you're looking for certainty, there aren't any certainties anywhere, so you just have to sort of, you have to live with uncertainty and undecidability. So if you go on to a history degree, you're studying history. You're not studying the past. The past doesn't have a history until historians kind of get to work on it. And so if you want to study history, you don't go back to the 19th century or the 18th century, you go to the library, and you pick up a book or a journal article and so on. That's where history is, within certain pages, certain texts and so on. If you want to go to 17th century Spain, you look at Dewey number 932 and 17th century Spain, there it is. So when you study through history, you are effectively studying what historians write. In other words, you're studying historiography. And that's what you're studying. And you can be as sure or not so sure about that sort of study as you can any other kind of study. You just have to be kind of satisfied with not knowing, ultimately, anything very much.